Hi everyone, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplanty Goodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. So today I want to talk about a specific plant, one which you might be able to see on the side of me here. Today I want to talk about the Philodendron Florida Ghost. And I'll bring it up and show you a bit closer so you can see some of the foliage. It's not quite at peak white at the moment, but we'll dive into that in just a second. So if you look, you can possibly see as to why this is called the Florida Ghost. And very, very, very cool plant. I'll bring it up so you can see one of the leaves, and it's starting to mature quite nicely, where you can get some of these extra ruffles and splits on the leaves. But I'm trying to find one where it might show it a bit better. If I turn this leaf around, you might be able to see why this is called the Florida Ghost. So you can see right at the top there is maybe where the head would be. These two bits here would be where the arms are, and the other two little bits at the bottom are like the little legs, which is kind of cool. But yeah, let me just do one more little view and I'll bring it up close so you can see. And note the color of the foliage, because that's where I want to start with this. I know I've done a previous video talking about the Philodendron Florida Ghost before, but I just wanted to dive in a bit more and talk about my experiences of owning this plant for coming up to close to 2 years, I would say now. One more thing I wanted to show you before I dive in, just so you can see, because I've got a lot of plants that have got similar growth patterns. Can you see quite how thin the stem is at the bottom, and also that there is a very significant bend? Janky support sticks, as always, to the rescue, but even then you might be able to see, if I turn this around, this is the most cumbersome of the plants that I have, you can see that the growing stem is actually getting a lot thicker than it is at the base. So this is one that I have chopped and propped since. It's doing quite well. The propagation of that is in pond, and I propagated it directly from cutting, letting it callus over for a couple of hours, and then putting it straight into pond in a self-watering pot. And it's doing really well, I'd like to say. I'm just going to look at it at the back. Yeah, it's doing quite well. I think there's 2 or 3 cuttings in there. All of them are growing new leaves, doing really well. Annoyingly, I only took that cutting just before we started going into autumn and winter, so it's not as fast as I would have liked it to be, but I'm pretty sure that's going to do quite nicely when spring comes around and summer comes around again. But talking about this awesome foliage, one of the things that most people might know probably at this point, I think this has become a bit more of a coveted plant, and I know a lot of people want it. It's become a lot more available both in the UK and I think in Europe in general. I can't talk about other parts of the world, but it is a philodendron that for a while was quite difficult to come by. I wouldn't say it was spectacularly rare, maybe in the very beginning, and I think one of the first few people that had one of these was Kaylee Ellen. And if you haven't checked out her channel, please do. Amazing bits of information. I started my kind of plant journey a bit more seriously around the time when she was starting out as well. So I think a lot of us might have done something similar, so we've all learnt along the way. But this was one of her favorite plants. And I saw videos and I saw pictures, but I'm just a bit like, it's okay. It's got a bit of cream. It's got a bit of white. Is it really that cool of a plant? Until I got one in my possession, and yes, I can say it is that cool of a plant, and I can understand why Kaylee and a lot of other people online have got really kind of an affinity towards this plant, because it is very easy to grow. At least it has been in my experience. It's not been a particularly difficult plant to keep happy. It's got slight bumping on the actual petioles, and I'll see if I can bring you in for a bit of a closer look on that. I don't know whether or not the camera is going to focus enough so you can pick that up. You might be able to see that there's a bit of texture on that petiole, but if not, take my word for it, there is a bit of texture to that petiole. And the other thing I was going to say, I don't know whether or not it's to do with the texture of the petiole or anything else. This plant, for me, in my situation, in my experience, has been one that hasn't had an awful lot of pest pressures. Now, you might have been able to see, and I'll pick it up again. I think this is going to be the up and down for this plant. I'm trying not to decapitate it with the fan that's going at the top. You can see a very dirty, I need to clean this up at some point soon, but this is probably going to be a summer job, a net pot. And I've still got, this is one of the philodendrons that I've still got in a chunky aroid soil mix, mainly because I know, and this is something that I kind of found out along the way, this is one that does generally appreciate going close to fully dry before being watered. I don't think I've ever had a chance to overwater this plant, but I've always tried not to, if that makes sense. I don't know whether or not it's particularly fussy in that respect. If you do have some experiences with overwatering the Philodendron Florida Ghost, do drop it down in the comments below. I'd like to know, because I think the majority of people that I know that have got this plant agree with what I'm saying, that it's not a particularly fussy philodendron. Now, most philodendron aren't fussy, and it makes sense because they're epiphytes. They grow usually off the side of trees. This is one that does, if you give it something, some form of a support, junky support sticks, because I am too cheap to buy moss poles and I can't be bothered to make moss poles. I think the extent of me doing any form of DIY in terms of giving support to plants would be doing the planks. I haven't done it for this plant. Possibly might try it on some of the propagations that I've got, but because the foliage is as large as it is and as mature as it is that I can see, at least in my collection, I don't know whether or not I'm going to have a plank large enough and whether or not I'm going to have to do several planks together and join them. So I don't know whether or not this might be one that I'm going to put on a plank. If I'd done it when it was a slightly younger plant, then maybe, but actually, to be fair, I'm already seeing some of the secondary characteristics in the more mature leaves, so the slight ruffling within the leaves. And I'll see if I can bring it in a bit closer, so you might be able to see it's a very, very tricky plant to kind of, you might be able to see, you can see some of these lines that are happening along the plant there, and you can see that all these ribs essentially are pulling out of the midrib. And you might be able to see as well some of the second, I'd like to say fenestrations, it might not be, the just cuts that happens on the leaves. And you can see as well on the bottom leaves, let me see if I can bring that up so you can see there, there you go, you can see there that that is not smooth, it's actually got some serration that is happening. And to be fair, other than the janky support stick, I haven't really given it any other real support barring that. So it is maturing without too much of an issue. Let's talk about extrafloral nectaries with this plant, and I have got another video on my channel, and I've started getting better at putting things in playlists, and you can go and find those on my channel. I think the way that I might have split them up for now, and this might progress into more specific playlists. I think I've got a playlist for just the philodendron, I've got a playlist for just the anthurium, and I've got a playlist at the moment for tips and tricks. I do need to create another playlist which would be for a lot of my other plants, so for instance the Hoyas, maybe some of my alocasias. I'm not sure if I've done an alocasia one just yet, I might have done, but you should be able to find the video that I'm talking about with extrafloral nectaries on my tips and tricks. If not, I'll put a comment up here. It might be on my Instagram profile, because when I was starting Instagram and YouTube a bit more seriously, I was doing videos on Instagram as well, realized that people appreciate Reels a bit more. If you're not following me, the Instagram details are down below in the description. Do come along. It'd be great to have you along for the ride. But yeah, I'll find, if it is on a playlist, I'll see if I can, I'm still trying to get used to how I get videos linked to the top of other videos. If I can, I might see if I can link it up there. If not, I'll kind of say on here that it's on my Instagram, and just check it out on my Instagram. It will be there. But extrafloral nectaries, sorry, that was a very, very long segue to talk about a video about extrafloral nectaries. Apologies. But extrafloral nectaries are essentially little, they almost look like water droplets that happen along the petiole and maybe sometimes the back of the leaves. and that is to essentially hearken the cavalry, which in the forest or in the tropical forest, it would be things like ants, because it's a slightly sugary substance, and that will bring the ants, and the ants will then protect the plant from other pests that would do the plant harm. So really, really cool. But this is definitely a plant that gets it, not to a huge amount, but in my experience, it does actually get some extrafloral nectaries. It doesn't happen quite as much in the winter, and I think I've noticed this across a lot of my other plants. This is more something that you might see in the spring and summer, which kind of makes sense because that would be the time when the plant is a bit more actively growing. So yeah, really, really cool. The other thing I would say in terms of watering with this, in the summer, in the spring and summer, when there's a lot more light in the conservatory and it's very, very warm in here, the people that have been with me for a while will know the sweltering heats of the summer in this conservatory. But yeah, in the summer, I think this plant was getting watered once every 3 or 4 days. It was drying out like that, but it was also actively growing like mad. Now that we're in the winter, I think its watering is maybe down to about 10, every 10 to 14 days. And I will say this again, and I've said this on previous videos, please, please, please try not to water on a schedule. Your plant's conditions will change day in and day out, even if they're in the same spot and the same location. The humidity might fluctuate because the heating might come on a bit more strongly, especially now in the winter, so the air might dry out a bit more. Even in the conservatory, when I've got top-down lighting, I live in the UK. A day like today is completely overcast, so it's not getting as much light. But for instance, yesterday, it was a relatively sunny day. So it would be needing more water during the sunnier day, especially because I try to keep the temperature a bit more constant during the winter in the conservatory. Don't ask about my heating setup in here. It's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, so it is one of those things that try not to water on a schedule. Try to, maybe if you want to be on a schedule, use something, and let me see if I can bring it up. Give me a sec. A moisture meter. Use your moisture meter to actually test the soil on the day that you're planning on watering, and don't water if it doesn't need it. Move the watering day by a couple of days. The thing that I found worked really well for me, and I think I've mentioned this on a couple of my older videos, and I do have an instructional video of how to use one of my favorite apps, which is the Plant Planner app, I think, if I'm not mistaken. It's on my phone. I'm also recording on my phone, so I can't check to tell you right now, but if not, I'll put a little note up there, and I'll see if I can link it maybe in the description as well for both the App Store and the Play Store as well. And that is something that I keep track of my watering schedule, my fertilizing schedule, also rotating the plants as well so they don't etiolate, which means moving towards the light. All of these things. But that's also got a really nifty feature of, okay, you can set it to remind you every 7 days not to water but to check. But then you can kind of put it on and say, okay, I want to delay it by a couple of days, and it will remind you again in a couple of days time, and you can recheck again and rewater. Always when you go to water, check first if it's needed and then water, especially so in the autumn and the winter. In the summer you can get away, and I hesitate to say this, you can get away with a bit more frequent watering because the plants, if it's warm enough and if it's sunny enough, they will use up that moisture a lot faster. Obviously, if it's sitting in sapping wet soil for a very long period of time, even in summer, and actually even more so in summer because it's warm and bacteria grows exponentially when it's warm, as far as I'm aware, yeah, I think that's true, you will get root rot faster. But balance it out. Moisture meter would be your friend with all of this. So let me put this down and we can keep talking. One of the last things that I want to talk about, and arguably something that has been spoken about a lot, and I'm quite glad that people like Kaylee Eden, and there's a lot of other YouTubers out there that have actually made these comments, is that there is no mint version of the Florida Ghost. And I'll see if I can bring it up, and you might be able to see some of my lower leaves, some of the very, very, very early leaves that I got on this plant. They are now looking a bit minty. But don't be fooled, it's the way that this plant grows and it's the way that the leaves mature. They can come in almost white. It's always going to be slightly off-white towards a beigey color. It can be quite bright, by the way, almost white, as I'm saying. And it can be a slightly creamier color, so you might be able to see some of these leaves here. And then as it fades into a green color, which means it can photosynthesize a bit better. Now, the fade can happen entirely and the leaf can go entirely green, and I'm going to show you a leaf here, and you can see that one's almost entirely green now, but you can see maybe some of the speckling that was there from when it was still creamy. But I found with this plant, not all leaves will go fully green, not all leaves will go mint. Some of them will stay relatively creamy, to be fair, and I still don't understand how this plant photosynthesizes enough to then push out more leaves, because I've got creamy leaves back to back. So I'm just like, I don't know. And it's a relatively fast grower as well. So very cool. More kudos points for this plant. But in terms of the mint discussion, it is to do with light. This is a philodendron that you can give it a bit more light. Don't give it scorching light all day long like you would do for a succulent maybe, although it might be able to take it. And that is the secret to getting those whiter, creamier leaves and not the minty leaves. The minty leaves, or even ones that are coming out green from the get-go, it's not getting enough light. Bump your light up. And if you see a slight bit of an improvement but not enough of an improvement, it needs more light. So get it closer to a brighter source of light or closer to a window. That will all help to keep that creamy white, almost white color that the leaves can get when they're coming out, which I know is the main reason why some people want this. Some people are actually quite happy. People were actually buying the mint version, and hopefully they weren't paying any more money than the regular version, because essentially it's the same plant. But it is one of those things that some people, I think, might like the mint color. They might prefer it over the cream color, and that's absolutely fine. And you know what? You can do that. Even if you've got the white version, just give it a tiny bit less light and you will get a slightly mintier color. It's very simple, really. It's kind of good because it means you've got the control with that one. And this is interesting because it goes against what a lot of the chimeric variegation, most of our plants that are variegated tend to be chimeric variegations. And I've done an entire video on this previously on my channel. You can find it on there. I think it's called something variegation, basically. Let's talk about variegation. But that, and I know I ruffled quite a few feathers on this as well, but please do your own research. I did my own research and came to the conclusions that I did. You cannot promote more variegation, so more splotches of variegation on your leaves by giving it brighter light. You can get brighter variegation by giving it more light, but the variegation, especially in chimeric variegation, is in the stem. It's in the genetics of the plant. So if you can see that you've got, for instance, a Monstera alba that has never done a half moon leaf, it doesn't mean it never will, but it might take a very long time if most of the leaves on that plant have only got about 10 to 20% variegation. That might be all you might be able to achieve with that plant. You might get some nice white segments on it. And yeah, as I said, you might still get the kind of half moon, the half white and half green that a lot of people really want to have. But it's usually part of the genetics. This, I don't quite know how the quote-unquote variegation, I don't know if it's technically variegation or if it's just part of the morphology of how the leaves would grow, but light does play a part in the brightness of the variegation. And actually saying that, sorry, I've just come a whole 360 around to what I was saying. It just makes it brighter. Same thing applies here. So for instance, if you don't get enough light, it'll be a mintier color. If you do give it light, it'll be a white color. There you go. Sorry. Went all the way around there. But I think that's all I want to say about this plant. Hopefully I haven't prattled on for too long. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. If you've got any questions or comments, as always, please drop them in the comments down below. I'd love to have that conversation with you. We're getting a bit more active in the comments now, which is great. I love to see that. And yeah, all that's left to do is to wish you a great rest of your day, and hopefully I shall see you here soon. Thanks. Bye.